People have their own takes on what is a disaster in animation. Whether it be a movie, a television series, or even an episode from one, there probably is just that one piece out of all that just gets your attention on how bad it can be. And for me, the episode that keeps coming back is Magic Duel, the 5th episode from the 3rd season of My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. It may be strange for me to pick this in particular, especially how this episode is almost universally loved by most who watch it. As for me, I became interested in the show around early to mid 2013, and when I saw this episode, I didn't like it. In fact, I really didn't like it. I know I talked about this with people a lot of times in my early experiences with the show, but at the same time, I was trying to tell myself not to get too worked up over this. I feel like there had to be worse things out there to talk about. But the more I was reminded of this, the more fascinated I was by how many things it got wrong. Now I want to make it clear, this isn't the worst piece of animation I've seen. Even for the show, it's only my 2nd least favorite episode. But there was just something about the bad choices that were made for this that really amazed me, and how it feels on a spectacular level. Like I said, I talked about why I didn't like this episode online several times before, but growing up over the years, I decided to go more in depth of why this episode didn't work and give a more structured retrospective of it. So without further ado, it's time to fully rip the band-aid off. Since the episode marks the return of a character known as the Great and Powerful Trixie, I felt it would be necessary to give my quick thoughts on our first episode, Ghostbusters, the 6th episode of the 1st season, which is the 6th episode in general. Now at first, I hated this episode because everyone else did. Yeah, I've got nothing. For an episode that wasn't viewed as very popular, me being a dumb person just hated this episode to follow the general consensus. But later I realized that following the general consensus is sometimes one of the stupidest things you could do. There's nothing wrong if you find yourself loving or hating something that's universally given that opinion. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong if you dislike something universally loved or like something universally disliked, and you shouldn't be afraid to have a different opinion. So I eventually revisited Ghostbusters, and what did I think? It wasn't that bad. It's not one of my favorite episodes of the show, it just did a good job accomplishing what it tried to do. It taught that sometimes it's okay to show off what you're good at, but just don't be a jerk about it. It's surprisingly a very rare lesson to teach. It doesn't just say showing off is bad, it says there's actually a right and wrong way to do it. Now as for the character topic of the day, what are my thoughts on the Great? I hate her. That was fast. Yeah, even if we're supposed to hate her, she's not really fun to watch either. Her boasting just comes off as annoying without any wit, and I really hate listening to her voice.
Who is so ignorant as to challenge the magical ability of the great and powerful Trixie?
I'm sure Kathleen Barr's a nice lady in real life, I just don't think she gives a good performance. I will say another thing I do give this episode credit for is that it doesn't seem like Trixie is a real expert in being a magician. Seeing how many unicorns having magic is pretty much normal in this world, she's honestly just making a traveling performance telling everyone to suck her ego. So no wonder everyone was annoyed by her. But let's fully jump into Magic Duel and its production. The plot is that Trixie makes her return to Ponyville obtaining something called the Alicorn Amulet and challenges Twilight to a magic duel. Whoever loses leaves Ponyville forever. Nobody takes notice of the amulet as Trixie uses it to win, banishing Twilight and sealing Ponyville in a dome. While the rest of Ponyville is suffering under Trixie's dictatorship, Twilight's friends send out Fluttershy to find Twilight when they discover information of the amulet. Twilight, who has been training with Sakura, eventually makes a plan with her friends to trick Trixie into taking it off. It works, and Trixie asks for forgiveness, and she gets it. The end. As for the episode's production, it actually started for Season 2 around the time creator Lauren Faust was still working on the show. But she felt unsatisfied for how it was turning out and eventually pulled it, wanting to do something different for Trixie. What she had planned, I don't know. I do know shortly after Faust left the show, the episode was brought back into production with a script by Emmy Larson because Trixie was such a fan-favorite character. Now that we got the story and production out of the way, let's get started. So, what is there to start with this episode? Due to the problems I have, I can almost start anywhere. Trixie herself as a character is definitely the biggest problem, but I want to save that mostly for near the end. So let's start off with something small, like her petty motivation. The fact that we're actually supposed to sympathize with her during this kind of astounds me. She's mad at Twilight because she humiliated her? Even though the main reason she stopped the Ursa Minor was to make sure it didn't destroy the town and kill everyone?
Oh, you've gotta be kidding me.
First off, you weren't Twilight's main priority when that happened. Second, with you saying you're the one dealing with the most problems, it's pretty much establishing that you care more about your own being rather than the lives of ponies who could have been killed by a monster. Third, you lied about yourself to make a profit for who knows how long. Sorry to say, but you kinda had this coming, and you got what you deserved. Something else that the episode tries to say is that she was made fun of and laughed at back in Ghostbusters when that clearly didn't happen. I'm definitely no professional writer. In fact, I'm actually kind of scared to be known as one. But I don't think it's good writing if you lie about something that happened before. Speaking of which, let's talk about Sakura. In this episode, she's magic. Yeah, she has magic. You know, something that she was accused of having in her first episode, but then it turns out that she doesn't have it. Suddenly, she just does. So does that mean—
She's a witch, I tells ya! Burn her! Burn her! Burn her!
And before you say anything, yes, I am aware that in early production of the show, Sakura was planned to be a second mentor figure. But the thing is, sometimes ideas, even if they sound good, need to stay dropped for a reason. And the whole thing of her having magic never comes back to play in the story. You can honestly cut this whole scene out and wouldn't miss a thing. If you want to see this kind of thing done better, look at my favorite episode, Sleepless in Ponyville with Princess Luna. Honestly, the fact that my favorite episode came after this is more than surprising. But the reason Luna's illusion worked better than Sakura's is because her dream powers made sense given her being the Princess of the Night. Her presence was foreshadowed and built up well in the episode. She doesn't want Scootaloo to give into her nightmares like she did, and it gives very good development to a character that up to that point wasn't given much. What's Sakura's excuse? What does her role have to do with anything? Is it just because they reference the Empire Strikes Back?
Unlearn what you have learned. Only then can victory be earned.
Oh, I get it. That was a movie. A movie that existed. That was a movie, and therefore, that was a thing. It was a thing! Honestly, if you want a better example of referencing this film, look at Toy Story 2.
I'll never give in. You killed my father.
No, Buzz. I am your father.
The whole ordeal of Buzz Lightyear is pretty much a big nod to sci-fi media, most notably Star Wars, so it doesn't feel too out of nowhere. They even do some pretty funny twists on it to make it stand out on its own, even if you never saw the original movie.
I finally defeated Zurg!
Father.
Oh, and speaking of funny, you know what's really funny? Not this episode! Huh? Huh? Seriously, there are so many times this episode tries to really hammer in comedy, but this is one of the unfunniest things I've ever watched. Even by a lot of bad moments something like Family Guy would have, I honestly can't name a single episode I didn't laugh at least once at.
What? Are we giving Seth's voice a rest?
But in all the times I've seen this episode, there's not one moment that made me laugh or crack a smile. It mostly ranges from being childishly stupid to surprisingly unpleasant. One notable example is whenever it tries to be fan pandering, or fandering for short. To be fair, a nod to your fans isn't automatically bad. It can work if you actually made some good jokes from it and make it stand out on its oown. The late 2010s of SpongeBob SquarePants had this down pat. They made several episodes where they referenced several great things from the classic seasons, but the top-notch writing made it work on its own without feeling forced. It even worked when there was an episode literally named after a background fish's blink and you'll miss it catchphrase.
My leg!
But much like Sakura, the whole fandom is just, remember this? That was insane! Looking into Parasprites! They existed! Hey, there's that one pony! She existed! It was insane! This whole thing feels like tears waving in front of the audience's faces. People are saying this was respectful to the fans, but to me, it feels more like an insult if they're going to be treated like that, and I think that they deserve better. I suppose I should also talk about the shenanigans with the Duel. Interestingly enough though, the very few people who don't claim this as an animation landmark did make criticisms with this ordeal. Some complained that the deal was an action-packed and just relied on comedy and didn't feel like an actual fight. Somebody did debunk this though. It was, I don't know, Marvin the Martian as a flasher. He brought up that a duel does not immediately mean fighting to the death, but rather a competition between one's abilities. And honestly, I agree. Just because it's a duel doesn't mean it has to be a gritty fight. However, that doesn't mean it's off the hook. I mean, if the duel wants to be more comedic, that's fine. And does it have good humor? Not even close. The jokes put in are dull, slow, and not creative in the slightest. Honestly, if you want this kind of duel done right, just look at Walt Disney's The Sword and the Stone. Merlin and Mad Madam Mim's wizard duel didn't need to be gory, but it was certainly creative. The ways they turned into different animals at many parts led to fun visuals and very good comedy. And keep in mind, this is from someone who thinks that this is one of Disney's lesser films in the animated canon. In addition to this episode's lack of humor, the shop scene at the beginning was also stupid. Why is there a dangerous amulet on display in a crappy store? That's honestly an apocalypse waiting to happen. Wouldn't it make more sense if Trixie paid someone to bring the amulet to her? It would be similar to Aladdin and the Scarab, where it adds a unique and eerie feeling of mystery. But no, let's just do this crap, especially when having the store owner bribed in giving it.
Would you like that gift wrapped?
Because we gotta try really, really hard to get one laugh. Everybody's got a laughing face to go ho ho. There's also a lot of mean-spirited jokes towards abusive Snips and Snails, which, yeah, let's talk about them too. Yeah, they were never the most complex characters, and they could get a little grating, but at best they were tolerable and not as bad as, say, Diamond Tiara. And yeah, while they did lead the Ursa Minor into town, they did feel genuine remorse and got punished for their actions.
We deserve whatever punishment you give us.
For starters, you can clean up this mess.
And people flipped their minds for the mustache bit? That was given because, unlike Trixie, they acted humble in defeat and didn't try to justify themselves. It's like saying, yeah, you two screwed up, but you're going in the right direction. And honestly, they didn't do much bad afterwards. Even in the mysterious mare duel, Snips had a good moment for telling Rainbow Dash to stop showing off and save ponies in danger.
Don't you think you should go and help?
In this episode though, Snips and Snails are constantly tortured and abused throughout the whole thing, including being put through slavery and getting whipped. These are kids, right? And it isn't cartoony or anything. The episode expects you to laugh at these kids being put to slavery, and that's the joke.
Is this meant to be humorous?
Oh, and speaking of jokes, there's this.
Wouldn't it be faster if we had some wheels? The great and powerful Trixie doesn't trust wheels. Now pull faster.
Now, I don't want to sound too mean here, but I genuinely and sincerely want to know, how is this funny? Like, not trusting wheels? That's the big knee slapper of this apparent flawless masterpiece? Like the wheels she used in her wagon in the last episode she was in, where she presumably had no problem with before? I mean, okay, I can't take it anymore. What's the joke? Seriously, for almost 10 years I've heard people laugh their heads off and make dumb memes of it, but it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's not even an exaggerated delivery, it's just that line and that's it. It amazes me how desperate this episode's comedy is. What was the writing process like? Oh right, the writer. Okay, I guess we can talk about him now. I'll just make this quick, but I want to make it clear that I hold nothing against Emmy Larson, personally. I've seen how he is, and he is a pleasant guy overall. I just don't think he's a good writer. Even his work on the rest of the show barely reaches above average with the exception of the Cutie Mark Chronicles. I also really love that one episode of Gravity Falls he worked on, Double Dipper, but even then, he only worked on the story and it was pretty much perfected by other people, so it's kinda sad, really. Okay, still got a lot to go. What next?
The sweet caress of Twilight.
Oh yeah, the main character, Twilight Sparkle. Normally I do think Twilight Sparkle is a good character. Not the best, but still good. She's nice, intelligent, greatly voiced. I like her motherly relationship with Spike when he isn't a punchy bag, and I really admire her passion. Whether it's being invested in doing research or improving her magic overall. Doing much to get better every day honestly made her a good role model. In fact, another thing I thought was awesome was her great skill in magic. As time went on in previous episodes, we saw how she went from great levitation to even making a shield stopping the Master of Chaos. Good thing absolutely none of that is represented here. If anything, she's honestly pretty bland. No stranger than most stereotypical generic protagonists you see in most stereotypical generic animated films. She mostly acts kind of wishy-washy, saying she doesn't know how to defeat Trixie, and it feels like she's seconds away from singing a generic I Want song. And before another one. Again. She's also kind of a weakling here. It feels like she forgot all the progress she made in her passion and can barely lift animals and has to rely on her friends for fake illusion instead of doing magic herself. Come on, if this was Twilight in previous episodes, she would have blasted at Amy off instantly. Okay, anything else?
Anything happens to them, Twilight, so help me.
No goody, Fluttershy. You say I like Fluttershy fine, but I never saw her as the best character. But in this, she suddenly acts out of nowhere violent to Twilight. Not only does it feel like another desperate attempt for a laugh, but it's just harsh to Twilight, who would never screw up unless handled by bad writing. Actually, maybe she has a point. But the real kicker is later at the library. To be fair with the rest of the characters, they're not much better. Since we see them ignore Fluttershy when finding an answer, are ready to give up just like that, and start whining about their own selfish benefits. Oh, and when Spike finds it, they force Fluttershy to go out on her own. So hooray, everyone's a jerk! So anyway, Fluttershy goes out to find Twilight in the Everfree Forest and tell her about the amulet. I would say that if she wasn't dragged by her animals.
This is me being brave. I want to be brave at home, locked in my closet with my teddy bear.
You know, in times like this, I think back to the heroic deeds of Mrs. Grisby. You know, the protagonist from The Secret of Nim. I think back to how she had no experience of dangerous adventure. She's just a widowed mother looking after her kids. Even though she was put through so much intensity and is terrified, she never backed down and kept going forward. Why? Because her family means the world to her. and even if she is afraid, she will always protect them. But for Fluttershy, I refer you to a previous joke. Everybody's got a laughing place, a laughing place. Seriously, you already went on many different missions and pulled through them, and this always frustrates me overall. You live next to the Everfree Forest. Mrs. Brisby only went on one dangerous adventure, yet never considered giving up. You will never be close to the level of Mrs. Brisby. To put it bluntly,
You suck.
alright, now I feel it's finally time. I've been holding this one back long enough, something I have been waiting to talk about since I started this review. I got all my other criticisms out of the way, let's talk about what especially makes this a true disaster of animation. You all ready? Here it goes. Justifying Trixie. For years. I feel like I've been hearing the exact same thing again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. The big defense I hear is that Trixie isn't bad, it's just that the Alicorn amulet corrupted her.
I can't stop thinking about Trixie. It's like she's gone from high and mighty to mean and nasty. Even though it provides great power, it also corrupts the user.
I'm telling you, Snips, she's getting weirder and weirder.
And the more she uses it, the more it will corrupt her.
And I've been hearing the same thing from fans, non-stop. It's like it never ends.
Trixie is the nicest pony ever.
It was just the amulet! It was just the amulet!
She would never do horrible things on her own. Maybe if you actually knew her, you know.
It was just the amulet! The episode said she was corrupted by the amulet! That's good enough for me!
It was just the amulet.
The amulet is the fun here, it's the amulet!
The amulet! The amulet!
Like I said, I've been dealing with this for years, and I am so glad I can finally shoot this down. Let me first start off by asking, at this point, what do we know about Trixie? From what we've seen of her in Ghostbusters, she was an arrogant, selfish, and malicious bully who took pleasure in humiliating and assaulting others. Throughout Magic Duel, what do we know of Trixie? Well, she's an arrogant, selfish, and malicious bully who took pleasure in humiliating and assaulting others. Not much of a difference. And people also say she would never go as far as enslaving a town, but honestly, this is the point where a lot of villains show their true and darker colors. To me, believing that a villain can't show their true and darker colors by the end is almost like saying you can't see villains falling off cliffs. If you want an example of this kind of trope, just look at Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. He started out mostly having a large ego and just acting like a jerk, but the more he didn't get his way with Belle, the more evil measures he took, such as threatening to throw her father in an asylum, or planning to kill the one Belle truly loves. Another great example is Jack-O-Lantern from The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. He started out as a good-hearted prankster that didn't know when to stop. It was after he was framed by the town, beheaded by the Grim Reaper, and forced into isolation is when he began to develop darker motives, such as much more sadistic pranks to even planning to control the universe. And given how much we don't know of Trixie outside of acting cruel, what's to stop me from believing that she would do all these horrible things on her own? There's also some that say Trixie's writhe and agony comment was because the amulet's corruption didn't wear off. Well, if she was corrupted, shouldn't she, fall over due to, being in a bad state? Again, given how much we don't know about Trixie, I'm just left to assume that she would be this tyrannical. Oh, and are we going to forget that she bought that freaking amulet herself, despite being told how dangerous it is? No matter how you look at it, all this happened is entirely her fault. And what happens after losing to Twilight? She's let go. Yeah, that's right. Nobody keeps her from escaping, no authorities are called over, not even a slap on the hoof. If I didn't know better, she could go back on her word of lose or leave Ponyville forever and return anyway. And once you know it, that's what happens. At the very end, she tries to fancy up Twilight's show and pretty much panders to her fan base, saying all her evil deeds was because of the amulet. She then asks for forgiveness without really apologizing and more like guilt-tripping. Yeah, this episode doesn't at all sound like the worst redemption I've ever seen in my life. If you want better redemptions, look at Yato from The Return of Jafar. At first he tried to say that Yato was controlled by Jafar's snake staff, but it quickly drops it by having Yato do good things on his own. He's surprised by how Aladdin stuck up for him and feels grateful for his kindness. Even when working for Jafar again, he realizes the error of his ways and sets things right in the end. Even Yato himself stated that the whole hypnotism thing was just to make himself look good.
Shoulda stuck with the snake staff defense.
I'd also look at Teen Angiers from Amphibia. When he sees the letter from Leaf explaining that she still cared for him all these years, he doesn't try to justify himself. If anything, he feels he doesn't deserve redemption.
The things I've done, the pain I've caused, there's no going back!
Even when he does help defeat the core, he never tries to put fault on anyone else, not even his controlling father. He knows that the one most at fault here is himself. He's even surprised that Marcy still cares for him.
Take care, kiddo.
But to wrap this up, let's take a look at a redemption from another show with a very similar writing style as Friendship is Magic, Frankie is Martin. In a later episode of Season 3, we got Keep Calm and Flutter On. Celestia thinks that Discord's reality warping powers can be put to good use and has Fluttershy be the one to tame him. While Discord does try to manipulate it first, he's suddenly surprised that Fluttershy stands up for him and considers him a friend.
We're friends?
Why, of course. I can't remember my house ever being this lively before you came along.
Oh, well, I've never really had a friend before.
Well, now you do.
Also notice how after that conversation, Discord looks nervous or winces whenever Fluttershy scolds him. Even when Fluttershy ends her friendship realizing she was tricked, Discord fully realizes how it feels losing a friend and sets things right. But even then, Celestia still said to keep an eye on him. Rightfully so.
I'll leave the elements of harmony with you, Twilight, just in case.
And do I even need to say how good Twilight's Kingdom is? Discord wasn't treated great by the girls outside of Fluttershy, which led him to switch on Tyrant's side. Once betrayed and feeling like he lost all his friends, he's absolutely broken, feeling he doesn't deserve anything. But Twilight realizes her mistake from before and has Discord freed from Tyrant. And even though Discord realized the error of his ways, he still had a long way to go.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Trixie gets squat. Yeah, it was just the amulet. Sure, I was a complete buttwipe last time on my own free will with no training before, but it was the amulet! But for some stupid reason, Twilight forgives. And what does Trixie do? Go right back to boasting about herself and leaves.
Don't you think the great and apologetic...
No, shut your freaking mouth. Oh my god, shut up. A million times shut up. I'm going to kill you. Shut up. You may think Trixie's most at fault in this part, and she is. But Twilight is actually no better. Yeah, this pony who I know nothing aside from being a psychotic maniac, yeah, she's cool. And let me just forgive you on behalf of everyone else. In private. How do you think the rest of her friends feel after her torment? How do you think Spike feels after being separated? How do you think the whole town feels knowing that the sociopath was intentionally given the slip? How should this have gone? I'll tell you how it should have gone. If Twilight does try to forgive Trixie, every pony else should show up, rightfully call her a loser, make her leave town forever, and make Twilight Honorary Town Rookie of the Day. I'm gonna be honest here. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is not a perfect show. Honestly, it probably wouldn't make my top 10 favorite cartoons, mostly because the quality can be inconsistent. But at the same time, when it shines, it does much more than that. The best episodes of the show are not only very good, but some of the best episodes I've seen from any cartoon, or even any TV show, with episodes like Party of One, Sleepers in Ponyville, Pinkie Pride, Gauntlet of Fire, and The Perfect Pair. Keep in mind, I first watched the show when I was starting to reach adulthood. With how the show impressed me with great writing, memorable characters, and a good morals at the age I was at, makes you know it would probably work wonders on kids. But the thought of something like this, being attached to a show where excellent quality can be accomplished, makes me almost feel sick and disgusted. Even with the show getting its own themed conventions, it feels like the show isn't praised by the whole public as much as Gravity Falls or Steven Universe.
I am a huge fan of a show that you don't typically see grown men watching, the new generation of My Little Pony.
And you want to know why? The reason it's sometimes mocked for being just a complete sellout for marketing is because of episodes like Magic Duel. The story was sloppily put together, any amount of emotion, thrills, or humor fell flat on its face in the most embarrassing way, the characters are either too stupid or unpleasant to watch, and the way he tries to justify the actions of such a loathsome and hateable character while trying desperately to appeal to a certain audience is about as insulting as you can get. All that is what makes this, in my opinion, the animated disaster. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and a special thank you to those who supported me.